Okay. Hello to the wide world as people slowly start to jump on to our Kicking the Bucket live stream. Welcome. I am Andi Kenzie. I am the creator of Kicking the Bucket. And Kicking the Bucket is a fiction podcast. It is a dramedy because you're going to laugh and you're going to cry, and it's immersive, which means it's like a TV series for your ears. And that podcast actually premiered last week, and episode 2 dropped yesterday. It drops every Wednesday up until August 20th. And if you want to know more about the podcast, you can just go to our website. The link is right below us, improvidarts.org/kicking the bucket podcast. So where do these live streams come in? Because I'm like talking about a podcast. I'm not talking about the live stream that we're just about to have. So these live streams are kind of like bonus content for the Kicking the Bucket podcast series. We're thinking of these kind of as your unofficial guide to aging, autonomy, and all the stuff that no one has told you. Or basically the resources that Dolores and Howard should have had. Today, I'm really excited to welcome back Michelle McCarty and Melissa Saffron. They are occupational therapists and end-of-life doulas from Solace and Sage. So welcome back, Michelle and Melissa.
Hello.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yay. So we wanted to keep on going with our conversation last week. So I'm going to start us off with a couple of questions. And for our viewers, welcome. I see we have a couple of people joining already. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them as soon as we can. But I'm going to get us started off because we've been having this conversation since the first listening club. And then we had a live stream last week, and we're considering this part 2 of this ongoing conversation. And so first off, I want to say, Michelle, actually, you just won an award. Can you tell us a little bit about the award that you just won?
Thanks, Andi. Yes, I actually graduated from Austin Community College as an occupational therapy assistant. Yes. And so I am the recipient of one of their 2025 Alumni Achievement Awards. So really excited and honored to be recognized for our work in the community. And it's just, ACC is just such an amazing campus, and they just provide an incredible amount of support. And I was a non-traditional older student, and they really matched my needs and, helped me continue on my professional path. So it's been great. And Melissa and I have been able to partner together and do some amazing things in the community. And so we're super excited to continue our journey together and be here and support Kicking the Bucket.
So awesome. Dana agrees with us. She commented, "Yay, awards." So yes, the awards are pretty fantastic. And like you said, ACC is super fantastic too. So
absolutely.
We're lucky. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm a little biased, but I kind of feel like it's one of the best community colleges in the country. But they're really great.
The support, I think that even after you graduate, I mean, they're still there for all that support and those connections and relationships. I think is amazing.
It really helps. Yeah. You need that. You need that.
Absolutely.
Everyone needs that. So, okay. So congratulations on that. And let's see. I wanted us to get started off today with this concept and the idea that I would have done it so much differently if I knew. So when we're talking about a good death, how to have a good death, let's use that as our jumping off point. Maybe that's too broad. Is that okay? I feel like that's a good jumping off point.
That's a great place to start.
Okay. So you can use Dolores and Howard as, because they didn't know if they had known. So, I'm going to let you two jump in.
I think what's really important to kind of note and remember, and you see it happen with Dolores and Howard, is I think there's a lot of assuming that goes on possibly between the patient and the physicians. And I think it's important when you're working with your physician that they know what type of person you are when it comes to information, especially about your health. Most of us fall into 3 categories. Where there's someone who doesn't want to know anything, little as possible, or you're someone that you're on a need to know basis. I just want to know as I'm experiencing what's going on. And then there's those of us who just, I want to know everything possible to know. And I think that's a really important place to start with yourself, to identify, where do you fall in those categories? And then let your physician know that. Because I think, they're going to answer the questions you ask. They can't answer the questions you don't ask. And so I think it's really important to be aware of that, so that there is better communication and there isn't this, that's where your control, that's where that sense of control, I think information is powerful. I think, a lot of people may fear information, but information can help alleviate a lot of those fears. And so I think, that's an important thing to identify and be able to have that open communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It feels like this doesn't just apply to you as the patient. It also applies to the people around you who
Mm-hmm.
might be helping with you if you need help, if you're not able to make some of these choices or decisions. So we kind of all, when we're going into these situations, we all need to know where we stand. Is that just your personality? Like I pretty much know that I'd be the one who I need to know everything. Do we know that instinctively, or or we have different personalities when we're in these medical situations?
Yeah, I think it might be a situational thing. I think it depends on what the situation is or the subject is. I think also, knowing what you want, it's also important to be able to explain to the physicians the why, why you are choosing a certain track or a certain decision that you're making. We've heard recently about not, pursuing, like with Howard, not pursuing a particular treatment approach to his cancer. Being able to explain to your physician why, because, Michelle and I've had and worked with a gentleman one time where, he was choosing not to take a particular pain medication. And when we further explored that and asked him why, we understood it was because he wanted to have more alertness and time with his children. And when he was taking those pain meds, it was making him very groggy. And so without that further exploring and understanding, there's other options that he could take now that we understood that and can then communicate that with his physicians. And so I think it's really important when you make a decision to really know the why behind that decision and share that, because there could be other options and you don't have to limit yourself to those, to the options that you're only aware of.
Yeah.
Right. And I think when you just say, no, I don't want to have the chemo. And that's kind of where Howard was. He didn't see that there was another conversation that needed to happen after the doctor. It was just like, I'm not going to have chemo and we're out, and, take me out to the woods, but that team around you, whether it's a palliative care team or a hospice team, they're there to, find out, what your good death would look like, what you do want, what is, like Melissa said, what is important to you. And, as far as being able to engage with your friends and relatives and loved ones, and, having pain and management, and what that looks like for you. So, but your medical team is not going to know what you need, and they're not always going to ask you. You've got to be that advocate. And that's something that we really work on, is helping that self-advocacy piece, to be comfortable to communicate to your doctor.
Is it not as simple, because I just know it's more complicated, but is it kind of the basics are, I'm a person who wants to know everything, and you tell the medical practitioners this, I want to know everything, because when I don't know everything, because it would be, I want to know all of the options, because no, sorry, now I'm getting them mixed up, because I'm thinking of the person who wants to know about these medical, what's happening to you, but then the why is separate, because the why would be, they then tell you this is what needs to happen, and then you say, well, I don't want to do that because I'm afraid that it's going to make me not aware when I'm around my kids, and I want to be aware around my kids. And when you say that, then the practitioner can say, oh, well, then there are these other options. So that, I'm kind of mixing them up, aren't I? It's I know you have to work people through it, and I'm like, is there a simple way, like you could go in tomorrow and be like, I know how to do this, but
I mean,
it's
I
not
think for
that
some
simple,
people,
is
like,
it?
I think like having a lot of, if you're like, I think what I'm hearing you say is if you're someone that wants to know everything, I want to know everything. I'm the kind of person, I am the kind of person, I would want to know everything because I'd want to be able to look at various options. If this happens, what would I do? Even if this if this doesn't happen, what would I do? Even for example, like a decision not to take something, an important question, important thing to discuss with your physician is why you're choosing. But it's also important to ask, if I don't do this, what does that look like too? Because you're choosing not to do something because you're assuming it's going to have a certain outcome, but do you know the outcome if you choose not to do it? So an important question is, I don't think I want to take this particular treatment because of these A, B, C, and D reasons, but also what does it look like if I choose not to do this? So I want to make sure that I really understand the outcome of my decision and that, I'm not mistaken about anything, because I think that also helps possibly give you more information, and it might change that decision and open up more opportunities to get more options.
Okay. So,
Right. When you're
so you
looking
can,
at, like, if you're a person that wants to know everything, I'm asking about what's the trajectory of that disease process? What is that going to look like? I want to know everything, from here on out. If I don't do, these treatments, or if I add this one in, how will that affect the trajectory? And so you constantly have in your mind a benchmark that, you've created the why and what's important to me and what I want a good death to look like. I absolutely don't want to be in pain, or I absolutely don't want this, or I do want to live to make it to my child's, 15th birthday. I mean, and so you have to prioritize. That's your why, and what your end of life process looks like. And then that's when you can match with your doctor. He's treating the disease process and you're managing the illness and how that affects you and your loved ones. And so there's two pieces, and that management of the illness is something specific to you and what you determine, and what's important to you.
Another personal experience we had was with a woman who was 93, and she was diagnosed with cancer, and her oncologist wanted her to pursue chemo and radiation. And so her question was, what does it look like? We helped her understand the importance of asking, what does it look like if I do it? What does it look like if I don't? And she found out that if she does do the chemo and radiation, there was a certain percentage that she would be able to have a 5-year survival rate. And then she's 93. She doesn't even have a guarantee from anyone that she has a 5 years, because they're talking about the cancer, not you as a person, the 5-year survival rate. And so it was like, at this stage of cancer, it's a 5-year survival rate if you use this. But is it with a 93-year-old? So it's important to say, what does this look like if I don't do this? What quality of my life, what will my quality of life look like for the next 4 to 5 years? And that was important to her, because if she, wants to have 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 more years and not doing it, I may only have 2 years, but 2 years of quality versus those 4 years of being very sick, possibly from the side effects of the illness. So it does depend on where you are, your age and things, but what's also what your quality of life is and what's important to you to ask.
Yeah. Now, we have a question about, you may be curious, you may want to know all these answers, but unfortunately, with the medical field being what it is right now, with the insurance companies and all of that, managed healthcare, a lot of the physicians don't have that much time for you. So what do you do in those situations where you're like, I want to know everything? And they're like, I don't have time to tell you everything. Here, go research this, go research that. Are there options, or do we just have to accept that and find a way to navigate the medical field knowing that?
Well, I think if you're, go ahead.
Go ahead, Michelle. No, go ahead.
I think if it depends on the type of diagnosis, if it's something like Alzheimer's disease, we know there's going to be a progression. I think there's certain things clinically that are specific to you that your doctor can be available to answer. But in general, if, your questions are, what is this going to look like in the mild stage or the moderate stage or in more of the advanced stage, and you're wanting general information, kind of what that trajectory looks like, there's amazing support groups, and there are, the Alzheimer's organization and local things where you absolutely need to connect to a support group of some capacity, a Parkinson's support group. There's local chapters here in Austin that are amazing. And so the Capital Area Parkinson's Society. And so I do recommend, for those general questions, because there is a lot of knowledge that you can and things that you can get answered in those groups, but specific to you and your medical condition and how a medicine or something would affect you. That's important in those moments. And then planning for your next visit, is going to be very important. And that's where you can meet with somebody and kind of organize your thoughts and your priorities to talk about, because you're right, you do have a limited amount of time, unfortunately.
And that it is important to plan ahead, and it's right, there is limited time, but having those questions in advance, knowing what you're going to ask even before getting the results. I think in the example of Howard, once he was given that information, and we've seen it a lot, we've been in those meetings with families, once they hear the diagnosis, it's like you don't hear anything else. You hear like 2% of what else is being said. And so you can't even, muster up the next question. And even if you did, it doesn't necessarily even mean you're going to register that answer. And so it is really important to come with your questions. And even if you have to say, could you please, we've even said, could you please write down the answer to these, because I may not hear everything you're saying, and I'll be able to process more later, but I have that information. And so that is a way to make the most of your limited time in these appointments as well.
So for those of you who are just joining us now, we're talking Michelle and Melissa from Solace and Sage, and talking about kind of the toolbox that you need as you go in and talk to the practitioners when you're trying to design like a better death or a good death, the resources that are out there and the things that you can put into place to help make things better, so that you don't go into it going, if I'd only known, I would have done these things differently. So on that note, if I'd only known, Dolores and Howard seems like the Kicking the Bucket seems like it's a story about euthanasia. And I know that we were talking about how it's more than just a story about euthanasia. It's more about a process, about these good decisions. Can we kind of dive into that a little bit about what, the more?
I think, Howard showing the ultimate display of wanting to have that control over something that feels very uncontrollable and out of control. I mean, you can't control your diagnosis. You can't control necessarily the trajectory of an illness, but you can control how we respond to it. And you can control having a good death. We tend to think of death and equate it to like a good birth. I think the more information we have, the less fearful we are, experiencing something. Uncertainty can be extremely frightening. We talked about having a father be part of the, in the delivery room and part of that whole birthing experience. But if he goes into this completely uninformed, it can be extremely terrifying. I mean, there's pain, there's screaming, there's blood, there's all kinds of things. And it's like, at the same time, if they've been fully informed and they're prepared, it could be it is an incredibly beautiful experience. And so I think that, and you can play a very active role in that experience and creating a good death experience by having that information and understanding how you can maintain that sense of control over that experience, maintain that sense of well-being and look at quality. So I think it's really important that you're aware of and having that understanding of, having that sense of control and understanding of what everything will be like in advance.
Well, and I think people just wait so long to have a conversation. with their physician, I mean, and their family, which is the whole point of this podcast series. And when you wait too long and get hospice in, and then they're like, oh, and he was gone in a week. I mean, you can't process and put together a plan in less than a week if you were actively dying. So to be a participant and have that control and have those conversations and know, this is what this is going to look like, and have your family members be prepared, to know what this looks like and the stages. And like Melissa said, to have that sense of control and well-being, because I've been informed and I understand what this process is going to look like. And when you're not doing it in a crisis, I can have those conversations and I can have that support with hospice or even on a palliative care team.
Yeah, and very similar to the birthing experience. It's like if you don't have a plan in advance, it's like, when I go into labor, who's going to come sit with the kids? Who's going to drive me to the hospital? What hospital am I going to? Am I having a midwife? Am I having an OBG? Who's going to be in the room with me? Do I want an epidural? Do I want to go natural? What music? Do I want music in the room? Do I want to be able to be in water? I mean, there's all these options. But the time to make those decisions is not the minute you go into labor.
Well, I was thinking.
And similar, I mean, and we don't all know. We don't all get. I mean, it was brought up last night by Mimi, by Dolores, the actor who plays Dolores, that being able to do this in advance and have these conversations and have an end of life journey plan, a personalized plan for yourself, it's a gift. I mean, it's such a gift to be able to do that. And we all don't know. I mean, we may not all get a life-limiting diagnosis. Things can happen completely out of nowhere. We don't know when we're going to die. But if we're having these conversations earlier and we're making these personalized plans known to our loved ones, whether through advanced directives or through conversations, I mean, then you will be prepared in those crisis moments on what to do. And you don't have to feel like I would have done it differently if I had known. I mean, we can all participate now in preparing for a good death later. It doesn't have to be in the moment.
Okay, so you say participate now. So we're hearing a lot of information through this whole kicking the bucket journey. So what is the first step that one should take?
So go ahead, Michelle.
I mean, identifying what your priorities are and what what's important to you, your quality of life, starting to learn how to define what quality of life means to you. I mean, that's a difficult question for people. We know it's being, having sense of control, well-being, and competence within your life, and having that initial plan to know what is important to me, and if you're in the process with a life-limiting diagnosis or progressive illness, looking at what are my limitations, what are, and the limitations are all the things around, what my family's limitations and abilities are, my caregiver, my environment, what things around me can support me, and then what things also may be limiting. Limiting could be finances. I mean, we know there's the reality of, even though I can describe what a good death is, can we find the match, with, and we talked about this the other night with, caregivers and finances, and how do you put all those pieces together?
And when we think about the plan, those priorities, limitations, abilities, and needs, Michelle and I come at it from that three-pronged approach, and it's like, what is your personal priorities as far as personally to you, and then my medical, we break it into personal, medical, and environmental. So it's like, what is personally important to me? What's medically important to me? And then environmentally, like, where do you envision spending and having that experience, those last moments? Do you, some people want to be in a hospital setting or in a hospice setting, if they're thinking about this in advance. And, some people want to be at home. They want to be in a familiar environment. Some people want their loved ones to be the caregivers. Some people want the caregiver to not be their loved one. Some daughters and sons want to be totally involved. And we've often heard, I just want to be a daughter. I just want to be a son, and I can't do all of it. And so I think looking at it as, in those three important areas, personal, medical, and environmental, as you start thinking about your priorities and coming up with a plan and your limitations, abilities, and needs. What do you need in each one of those categories looking ahead?
It becomes so multi-layered though, just because it's you, but it's also, well, just like, my parents. So it's like what I would want for me, but then my parents would want for them. And then it's the joint conversation of like how it aligns, and then the siblings, and then it's also overwhelming. I think
I think it comes,
I don't know. I don't want to deal with it because there's just too much.
I think it comes back to like, think of it again as a birthing experience. If you were to join your mom's birthing experience, like we wouldn't go in and take over because we know they're having that experience. We're invited in, I've had people there too. And it's like, they're invited in, they're not here to come in and take over this experience. And so I think if we look at it that way and become more curious, and asking those questions, it can also take a lot of pressure off the caregiver and the loved ones, that you're actually there to experience with them and not necessarily have to navigate it for them if they're doing this in advance and they're letting you know.
Well, then I think as a adult child of, aging parents, I do have to have my own plan because my mom's plan, is her plan, but I do have to come with my own. And that's, I think, why there's such a tremendous need for loved ones and caregivers to go through the process of creating their own plan, because many times what we do is create something that's not sustainable, and then we get very burned out because I didn't identify as a caregiver what my limitations and my abilities and needs are. And so, in my family, we all had to sit down and say, what role is everybody going to take based on their limitations and abilities so that we could create something that was sustainable. Our priority was all the same. We were all trying to support my mother, but this is what I can bring to the table and this is what I can't do because I am a busy mom and a wife. And so when everybody can at least have a structured format to come to the table, it creates less chaos and overwhelming because this is what I can do, this is what I can't do, and this is what I need. And we come together and we put the pieces of the puzzle together on the table. But at least I feel heard as a caregiver that I did acknowledge what I can and can't do.
Okay, so your mom made her plan, and then all of you heard her plan, and you said, well, in my plan, this is what I can and can't. Okay. So many
balancing those,
so organized.
Yeah. And the thing that brings them together, because you're balancing two different people's plans, because the caregiver, the loved one, the families, and the individual, your loved ones. The thing that keeps them together and holds them together is the story. If the story is we're all wanting to support a beautiful or a good death, a dying experience, that's the story. You create that story, and as long as you're all telling the same story, you have different roles in that story, but it becomes a problem when everybody has a conflicting story. And that's the most important thing, is that we're all telling that same story. And that is something that we help our clients with, is identifying what their plan is and then helping them narrate and create that story that everybody's essentially on the same page. It may look different, everyone's roles, but everybody's on the same page.
Or like you said, how avoiding the people wanting to define somebody else's story, the story of their death based on an experience they had. Remember, based on my experience, I think that your story should be this, but no, you have to leave it to the protagonists. Since we're talking the main characters, it's their story of their death. It's not everyone else's. So oh, we could always just keep on going on and on. Okay, but so we're getting close to the end. I wanted to hear if either of you had any final thoughts, but also you brought the book to the listening club, so I'm wondering if you could share that book here for people who didn't know about it. The book that you brought, that you shared.
I think one of them we brought was Atul Gawande's book.
Being Mortal, and then the other one was the Conversation Project. And we can continue to bring books. We'll be there every week. And so we got bags of books. So we can do that and even put a list together of some of, some great reads and share.
Mm-hmm.
That would be
wonderful
awesome.
books.
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
you have any final thoughts that you want to say, or you're like, no, because this conversation is going to keep on going. So
It's going to keep on going.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, so anybody can find you either at the upcoming listening clubs and or at your website below, Solace and Sage, correct?
Yep.
So thank you both for being here. I'm looking forward to our future conversations and keeping this story, our story, making our story the good story, the perfect story. So, okay. Thank you. Oh, I actually have some final things I'm supposed to say. I'm supposed to say, come back next week because, for our live stream next week, every Thursdays at 10:30. Keep the conversation going on our socials. Thank you to all of the viewers who are here today. Thank you to all the viewers who see this afterwards. And we hope to see you at the listening clubs. Go to the website, the Kicking the Bucket website, for all things Kicking the Bucket, a link to the show, a link to these restreams, the newsletter, everything. So we hope to see you online. We hope to see you in person. We hope to see you everywhere. Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.